If you were walking along the southern coast of England in early 1944, you might have passed by a perfectly ordinary-looking ice cream shop. But behind the plaster and the quaint storefront sat a massive, humming industrial pumping station, running in complete secrecy. This hidden machinery was part of PLUTO, the pipelines under the ocean. It was designed to violently push thousands of gallons of fuel through an underwater hose directly across the English Channel to supply the front lines in France. Pumping fuel under the sea was only one part of the requirement to keep the invasion moving. In the months leading up to the invasion, the Allies amassed so much material in southern England that if packed into a single fully loaded cargo train, it would stretch from Lisbon all the way to Moscow. Before a single soldier set foot on the beaches of Normandy, the invasion was already being fought. It was a campaign waged in the shadows, relying entirely on extreme mechanical engineering and absolute deception. Standing between the Allied forces and the liberation of Europe was the Atlantic Wall. The Germans had constructed a vast network of coastal defenses, an enormous building project equivalent to about $200 billion today. Breaking through this nearly impenetrable barrier head-on was a statistical impossibility. The Allies had to bypass it tactically. To do so, they launched Operation Fortitude South. The goal was to trick the German High Command into believing the main invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, leaving the actual target of Normandy less defended. They invented an entirely fictitious 1st U.S. Army group, supposedly stationed in Kent and Sussex. Planners generated volumes of fake radio traffic, simulating the communications of a massive gathering force. On the ground, the stagecraft was physical. The Allies deployed hundreds of inflatable rubber tanks, trucks, and landing crafts into open fields. Built by the Goodyear Rubber Company, these decoys were intentionally left exposed to be photographed by high-flying German reconnaissance planes. To legitimize this phantom army, they gave it a very real commander, General George S. Patton. He was the Allied general the Axis command feared the most, making him the perfect decoy to anchor the illusion in the southeast of England. By feeding the enemy exactly what they expected to see, the Allies weaponized German surveillance against itself. When the actual invasion fleet finally crossed the Channel, the defending forces were hopelessly fractured. Even with the element of surprise, the Normandy coastline presented a brutal environment. Heavy surf, wide expanses of sinking clay, and thousands of lethal steel obstacles turned the beaches into a death trap for conventional landing forces. To survive the landing, British engineers developed the Funnies, a specialized series of heavily modified Churchill and Sherman tanks built to solve specific environmental hazards. To clear paths through buried explosives, they deployed the Sherman Crab. This tank featured a large rotating drum fixed to the front, covered in heavy, weighted chains that physically beat the sand to detonate landmines through sheer mechanical force. Then there was the Duplex Drive, or DD tank. Engineers took the 35-ton iron vehicle and fitted it with a collapsible canvas screen. By displacing the air around it and driving dual propellers off the tank tracks, this massive machine could float, masquerading from a distance as a small, harmless boat. Navigating the English Channel in a canvas-wrapped tank was incredibly dangerous. While most of the crew stood on the upper deck ready to escape, the driver was locked inside the sealed metal hull, forced to steer blindly as ocean waves threatened to tear the fragile screen and sink the vehicle instantly. Other variations were built to manipulate the terrain itself. The bobbin carried a massive roll of matting on its front, unspooling a temporary roadway over soft blue clay, so following vehicles wouldn't sink. The Ark had its turret removed and extendable ramps installed, driving directly into obstacles to act as a mobile bridge. Breaking the Atlantic Wall required engineers to abandon the standard limitations of armored warfare, forcing heavy steel to function in environments it was never built for. Getting troops onto the sand was only the initial phase. Once there, the Allies faced a massive logistical bottleneck. They had to rapidly unload millions of tons of cargo, but capturing any of the heavily defended French ports would be nearly impossible. Since they couldn't capture a port, they decided to bring their own. They constructed the Mulberry Harbors, two complete prefabricated cities of steel and concrete, built in England and towed piece by piece across the ocean. These harbors utilized massive floating girder bridges that connected the deep-water moorings directly to the beach. Because the English Channel has volatile extreme tides, these structures were specifically designed to rise and fall with the water level, allowing trucks to unload at any hour of the day. To protect this delicate infrastructure from rough seas, they created an instant breakwater. Tugboats dragged massive hollow concrete blocks called phoenixes across the channel and sunk them to the seapad. For additional protection, lines of obsolete warships were deliberately sailed to the coast and scuttled to form a solid steel seawall. Amidst this fabricated infrastructure, the human reality of the invasion was chaotic. Soldiers laden with heavy equipment had to physically climb over the sides of massive troop transports, descending cargo nets into small, violently pitching landing crafts to make the final run to shore. When faced with unfavorable geography and entrenched enemies, the Allied forces simply manufactured a fully functional port city in secret, towed it across the sea, and anchored it overnight. Moving beyond the initial landing, the survival of the beachhead depended on an entirely new challenge: sustaining a massive, moving military force with millions of tons of ongoing supplies. The most critical and vulnerable resource was fuel. Planners estimated that petrol and oil would make up over 60% of the required supply weight. To transport it by ship, they prepared 14 million jerry cans, a volume so large that if stacked side by side, they would stretch from London to Rome and back again. Relying purely on surface ships for fuel was too risky. The solution was the physical installation of the PLUTO pipeline, snaking directly across the uneven seabed of the English Channel to pump continuous streams of oil from Britain to the advancing tanks in France. To lay this pipe, British engineers constructed massive floating steel spools known as conundrums. Towed by ships and slowly rotated, these enormous drums unspooled the heavy pipeline directly onto the ocean floor, linking the two countries. The entire push into Europe was tethered to this invisible, continuously flowing, and highly vulnerable umbilical cord of resources. On the ground, the logistical burden fell heavily on the individual soldier. Uncertain of when they would be resupplied, troops stormed the beaches completely loaded down with extra ammunition, rations, and gear, making basic movement nearly impossible in the wet sand. The physical scale of this preparation crowded the English countryside. Fields upon fields were filled with the 14 million fuel canisters, meticulously dispersed to prevent a single air raid from destroying the stockpile. Behind the localized chaos on the ground was a system of microscopic control. Military planners pushed wooden blocks across enormous table blueprints, tracking the exact placement of 7,000 different combat necessities, right down to surgical scissors and individual grenades. This chart shows the rapid quantitative buildup leading to the invasion. Over 16 million tons of supplies, gathered and coordinated across 15 different nations, steadily accumulated before funneling into a single massive logistical spike on June 6th. Strip away the romanticized vision of D-Day. The liberation of Europe was certainly a triumph of human bravery, but it was forged by radical deception, absurd inventions, and the cold, unforgiving logistics of industrial warfare.